Chapter 12. A Mysterious Phone Call. We arrived at the former Dizzy Castle to see that Satan had wasted no time in adding his own personal touch. Demons lumbered through the halls, taking down the portraits of beloved Dizzy characters and replacing them with grotesque paintings of horrific hell beasts. Jerry, the hatchet-headed intern, met us at the door with a grunt and led us down the hall to the main conference room, which Satan had taken for his office. He had had the desk replaced with the smooth obsidian slab from his office in hell, and the fluorescent lights had been replaced with wooden torches. Behind the huge obsidian desk, the heads of beloved Dizzy mascots were mounted like hunting trophies. I hoped that they were empty. 2 large glass-doored cabinets full of what looked like scientific equipment covered the left wall. The strange metallic instruments within them busily buzzed and whirred, occasionally emitting bright puffs of rainbow-colored smoke. Satan was sitting behind his desk and directing the demons on how to perform renovations, a huge grin on his face. Miss Hatchetface and I sat across the desk from Santa in 2 cushy leather office chairs, while Frank and Teddy and Sarah played in the corner. Miss Hatchetface regarded Satan with an expression that suggested she was about 2 seconds away from lunging over the desk and punching him in the mouth.
"Can you please just tell me what in the hell is the matter with you?" she demanded.
Satan continued to direct the demons around his office for a moment, before stopping and giving her a look of surprise. "Who? Me?" he asked.
"Yes, you. Who else would I be talking to?"
"I thought you were talking to Frank and Teddy." Miss Hatchetface cocked her head and squinted, only managing to spit out a few incoherent sounds of anger. "Are you gonna be okay? Do you want me to buzz Tina and have her bring you a sedative?"
"I don't want a sedative. I want you to be less of a jackass."
"I can try, but I can't make any guarantees. Do you have any more manageable suggestions?" Miss Hatchetface closed her eyes and took a deep breath, placing her palms flat on the obsidian desk.
"I just want to know what kind of insanity possessed you to decide to destroy Disneyland and replace it with this garish demonic monstrosity."
Satan twirled his goatee and a coy smile crossed his face. "It's part of my master plan," he said cryptically.
"Which is?"
Satan tapped the side of his head knowingly. "We're gonna get into the theme park business. We've already got the parks down in hell. All we have to do now is move them up to Earth. We're gonna open franchises all over the continental United States, and that's only the beginning."
"Okay, forgetting the fact that you are completely insane, why do you want to open theme parks across the U.S.?
"What do you mean, why?" he asked, straightening his tie in the mirror that sat on his desk. "For the same reason anyone does anything. Money." "What?" I said. "You live in hell. What could you possibly want with Earth money?" "Well, first of all," Satan said, giving up on his tie and turning back towards us, "I never wanted to live in hell." He took a little round mirror out from his pocket and began picking at his teeth, dislodging a large chunk of lettuce and flicking it across the room. "Second of all, do you have any idea how expensive a human soul is?" "I don't know, and I don't care. You shouldn't be buying people's souls in the first place. How would you feel if someone else owned your soul?" "I don't have a soul." "Because you're a demon?" "Because I'm a CEO." "Yeah, that makes sense." "Look, Dylan, I've got big plans for us." Us? You, me, Sarah? All of us are going to have to chip in. I'd ask my daughters to help, but they take after their mothers. And sadly, all 187 of my ex-wives are depraved lunatics.
Satan, do you think maybe you're the one who... And besides, Sarah being my direct descendant on Earth and all, it seems appropriate that she be included in my plan. A thought flashed through my head with a twinge of pain. Something about a powerful satanic ritual and the portals between dimensions. I tried to seize on it, but it was useless. The thought had gone. That's absolutely ridiculous, I insisted. Is it? The ritual of a Mudmagar is the ultimate test, Dylan. Nobody but my direct descendant could have widened the portal between hell and earth enough to allow me passage. They just wouldn't have sufficient magical power. Wait a second, I said. My stomach sank. Is this a roundabout way of saying that you had sex with my ex-wife? I don't know. Is your ex-wife a demon? No, not in the literal sense at least. Oh wow, ex-wife humor? That's a little trite, isn't it? I thought you were supposed to be a writer. I just watched an army of demons take over Disneyland. I apologize if I'm a little out of sorts. Well, I'm sure you'll think of a zinger in editing, he said. Look, if you didn't sleep with my ex-wife, how on earth could Sarah be your descendant? Well, the 70s were a crazy time, Dylan. Sexually, I mean. Who's to say there aren't thousands of little half-demons running around on Earth? I mean, where do you think all the Ritalin kids came from? Satan? Yes, Dylan. Can we please get back to the theme parks? I feel like we've already covered that topic in sufficient detail. Humor me. Sure. Do you like knock-knock jokes? That's not what I... So, you're going to open up amusement parks all over the US. That's correct. To make money? Exactly. To buy souls. Bingo! I don't get it. What are you going to do with all these souls? We sell them. What? I don't really have time to explain the basics of the free market to you, Jerry. Buy low, sell high. That's the gist of it. But what you're doing is evil. It's just business, Jerry. You ought to know that. Even Frank and Teddy knows what that means. Indeed, bellowed Frank and Teddy. It's just business is what you say when you want to do something terrible and not feel bad about it afterwards. What? No, that's not it at all. But that's what you told me. Satan tugged at his collar nervously, and I realized that I was getting nothing out of this conversation but a headache. I brought my hands up to my face and rubbed, letting out a long sigh. Mr. Rogers, do you mind if I cut in? Please do. With all due respect to Satan, she began, before Satan cut her off. Mr. Satan. With all due respect, Mr. Satan, she continued, rolling her eyes. Have you really thought this through? Who on earth is going to buy human souls? Well, I expect the humans will buy them back at inflated prices. It's not too fun having your soul owned by the devil, after all. So you want to make money so that you can buy souls, and you want to sell the souls to make more money? Isn't that a little circular? Satan sighed. Look, you're overthinking it. An effective business strategy doesn't have to make sense. It only has to make money. Where on earth did you get your business degree? Online college. Miss Hatchetface smacked her palm on her forehead. Satan, aren't those colleges kind of... What, scams? Why, because they lure in naive young people with promises of a better future, and then bilk them out of thousands of dollars in exchange for a degree that you have to print yourself at home? Yeah. That's exactly the reason I was thinking of, I said. Well, you may call that a scam on Earth, but in hell, we call it a masterclass in practical business ethics. Okay, said Miss Hatchetface.
Then what about all of this? She motioned to the cabinets full of scientific equipment, and for the first time since the start of the conversation, Satan looked visibly uncomfortable. He shifted nervously in his chair and pulled on his goatee. Just some stuff I'm holding for a friend. You have friends, replied Miss Hatchetface. Just then the phone rang and Satan put up his hand, signaling us to stop talking. Sorry, I'd better take this call. He picked up the receiver and held it to his ear. As he listened to the person on the other end, the grin slowly melted from his face, replaced by a frown and a furrowed brow. And you're absolutely certain, he said after a few moments of silent listening. He paused to listen to the response. That's impossible. Already? He paused again. But we're on Earth now. Surely they wouldn't... What? Earth too? Satan's frown deepened. What am I supposed to do about it? There are some things that even I can't. Yes, I understand. I'll be right there. Satan looked as if he had aged 10 years in the course of that 30-second phone call. His normal carefree grin had been replaced with deep lines of worry, and his shoulders had visibly slumped. He let out a deep sigh and rubbed his forehead. He put on a forced smile and looked up at us. Well, he said, clapping his hands together. I've got good news and bad news. Oh, no, said Miss Hatchetface. The bad news is that an urgent matter in hell has been called to my attention, and I need to go see to it immediately. And the good news? Asked Miss Hatchetface. The good news is that I'm turning my Earth operations over to my direct human descendant. Oh, wait a second, you can't possibly mean... That's right, said Satan, beaming out an obviously forced smile. Sarah is now acting CEO of Dizzyland. Dizzy Hell? Land of Dizzy? Well, picking a name can be her first act as CEO. She's 5 years old. Yes, they grow up so fast, don't they? He said absent-mindedly while checking his watch. Don't worry, it's a small problem, really. At the very most, it should only take a couple 1,000 years to resolve. Before I had a chance to object, Satan had vanished in a roar of flames and smoke. The room was silent. We all stared at each other in disbelief. All of us except for Sarah, whose grin was slowly spreading from the corners of her mouth to light up her entire face. This means I get all the cotton candy I want, she squealed. Chapter 13. Dizzy Hell. We all sat in fold-out chairs on a makeshift stage while the demonic and captive human populations of Dizzyland milled around below us. Sarah was standing on a chair with books piled up on top so that she could reach the microphone on top of a rickety wooden podium and fumbling with a piece of paper. Written on the paper was a speech that Miss Hatchetface and I had helped her prepare, with unwanted input from Frankenteddy. He was also on the stage, and had taken off the head of his teddy bear suit, and was now absent-mindedly licking a red snow cone while it melted and dribbled down the front of his costume. Friends, Sarah began. Even though her amplified voice was still small and quiet, she cleared her throat. I have gathered you here today to announce a change in Dizzy Hell management. The Dark Lord Satan has gone away on urgent business. In the meantime, I will be your acting CEO. I smiled a little as Sarah pronounced the word CEO as CEO. You may be wondering what that means for the future of the park. Firstly, all food will now be provided free of charge. Secondly, all flies of butter are not to be harmed on pain of death and eternal damnation. Frankenteddy nodded his approval at his addition to the speech, and confused murmurs went up from the crowd. Thirdly, Sarah said, folding the paper up into a neat little square and placing it in her pocket.
Have fun.
The crowd below stood in awkward silence as the humans and demons below wondered what they were supposed to be doing. Sarah frowned and looked to me for answers, but all I could give her was a perplexed shrug. Frankenteddy stood up and lumbered over to the microphone, his steps clumsy and uncertain in the giant snow cone-stained bear costume. He lifted Sarah off the chair and set her gently on the ground, seizing the microphone in one of his humongous costumed paws. His throat clearing sounded like a chainsaw being taken to a brick wall.
The Dark Lord Satan commands you to have fun.
The crowd remained still and stony-faced, and it was Frankenteddy's turn to look to Sarah for answers. Instead of a perplexed shrug, she gave him a smirk and motioned for him to sit back up on her chair. Once he had done so, she took the microphone in her hand and gave him a side-eyed smile.
Ahem,
she said, trying and failing to fight back a grin.
Everybody, dogpile Frankenteddy.
Frankenteddy's look of surprise barely had time to register as the human children below stormed the stage, leaping at him and climbing him as if he were an enormous fuzzy tree. Sarah looked to me and smiled, and her blue eyes shone bright in the sun.
Satan, give me courage,
Frankenteddy said, as he disappeared under a writhing ball of children.
There is no greater honor than to die in battle.
Miss Hatchetface covered her mouth and laughed. Sarah leapt off the stage and ran at another demon, an ugly bipedal lizard-looking thing with a pot belly and two stunted arms like a T-Rex.
Everybody dogpile this thing!
She shouted. A few braver children joined her charge, sprinting full tilt at the squat green demon. The demon waved his tiny arms in protest, but was quickly bowled over as Sarah and her vanguard tackled him. A flood of others followed, burying the demon's weak protests under a chorus of shouts and giggles. With that, the icy atmosphere of the park seemed to thaw a little, and the children wandered off over to other demons who carried them off to new rides while their parents watched in slack-jawed horror. Frankenteddy had finally managed to fight his way to the top of the pile, and he made his way over to us now, dragging along a few children who had refused to admit defeat, and now clung to his legs giggling.
It seems that this land of Dizzy is an acceptable substitute for the parks of pain and damnation in hell. Though I hope that there are many, we shall need them when Satan closes down.
Miss Hatchetface's smile vanished, and a look of worry took its place.
What do you mean, closes down?
The Dark Lord Satan means to close down hell and relocate business operations to Earth.
His tone suggested he found this to be thoroughly uninteresting.
He what? And how do you know this anyway?
I heard him discussing it in his office with Sarah, while you and Lord Rogers toured the Department of Daryl.
Miss Hatchetface buried her face in her hands and drew a long and deep breath, before looking back at Frankenteddy.
And why in the hell didn't you say something earlier?
Frankenteddy shrugged.
Nobody asked me.
Chapter 14. Satan's Secret. Miss Hatchetface and I had left Sarah to play with the other children while we escorted Frankenteddy back to the office for questioning. The three of us were seated around the vast obsidian slab that served as Satan's desk. The dim torchlight danced across the polished black stone surface as Frankenteddy gorged himself on various snacks that he had stashed inside the lower half of his bear costume. So far, I had counted 18 candy bars, 7 bags of Cheetos, and a full plate of spaghetti. Our questioning had been going rather poorly, with the exception that Frankenteddy, as of yet, seemed utterly oblivious of the fact that he was divulging top-secret information.
So, let's go over this again,
repeated Miss Hatchetface. Frankenteddy shrugged and pulled out another bag of Cheetos and ripped into it.
Right.
He believes that the future of hell is not stable. He wishes to relocate all future business operations to Earth. But why? What does hell have that Earth doesn't? A great many things, Lord Rogers. Cotton candy, hot dogs, cartoons involving sponges.
But why does he believe that the future of hell is unstable?
Asked Miss Hatchetface. Well, he seems to believe that there is some imminent threat to hell's safety. The words of Satan's phone call echoed in my mind. Earth too? He had said. I wondered. He could be planning anything. I can't get a handle on that guy. One minute he's all smiles and cheer, and the next he's razing a beloved family theme park to the ground. Miss Hatchetface shook her head.
You don't know the half of it. I'd be surprised if even Satan knew what his plans were. He's always been a couple dice short of a Yahtzee, if you know what I mean.
What is a Yahtzee? Asked Frank and Teddy.
It's a game where... It's just a way of saying that Satan is crazy.
I see.
We need to find out what he's up to,
Miss Hatchetface said. Her face was dark and stern. How? He's all the way down in hell.
Do you know where he went, Frank and Teddy?
I do not.
Then how do we find him? I have an idea, but you're not gonna like it.
What is it?
If Sarah really is Satan's descendant, demons will be compelled to obey her. We could find someone who knows where Satan went and track him down.
Isn't hell dangerous?
Not for the descendant of Satan.
My stomach grumbled, and I could feel myself frowning. I didn't like the idea of taking Sarah down to hell again one bit, especially not with the specter of some imminent and unknown threat looming over it. Still, it didn't seem like I had any other options. I sighed, and Miss Hatchetface looked at me expectantly.
So, do you want to go to hell?
She asked. All right, fine. Just please don't put it that way. Let us make haste to the kingdom of Satan, Frank and Teddy chimed in helpfully. That's not really any better. Chapter 15. Troll Demon PhD. We arrived to a red wasteland of yellow bones and black smoke. Bruised purple clouds drifted slowly across a blood-red sky. Obsidian cliffs crowded the landscape, and the air stung the back of my throat with a sulfuric tang. Where are we? I coughed. This is supposed to be the office of Satan, bellowed Frank and Teddy, who had by now stripped off his snow-cone-stained costume.
It's gone. Where do we go now?
I scanned the horizon, but it was empty desert except for broken bones and a colossal blue rock.
There,
Sarah said, pointing at the rock. There? The rock?
It's not a rock, Daddy.
What do you mean it's not a... The rock stirred, sat up, and began to pick its nose. Oh, I said. What I had mistaken for the rock could be best described as a troll. It had thick, scaly blue skin and two stubby white horns that looked like they'd been chipped at with a jackhammer. As it pushed itself up to its feet with a huge stone club, I saw that it was clothed in nothing except a raggedy yellow loincloth that could have served as a tent for a family of 5. The hot stink of its breath washed over us as it growled. Can it talk? I asked Miss Hatchetface. Of course I can talk. I was just clearing my throat. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll have you know that I have a PhD in demonic studies. Okay. The troll demon reached into one of its pockets of its loincloth and pulled out a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles. It pulled a rag from another pocket, wiped them off, and put them down. "Now, what do you want?"
"We were wondering if you knew where we could find Satan."
Ugh. The demon growled again as it patted its pendulous white belly. "Last I heard, he was on Earth."
"That's it? Do you know what happened here, where Satan's office went?"
Why should I tell you? The troll demon rubbed its chin.
I opened my mouth to respond, but Sarah patted me on the arm and said, "I'll handle this one, Daddy."
She stepped towards the demon and puffed out her little chest.
"My name is Sarah Rogers. I'm the direct descendant of Satan, and I command you to tell us what you know."
A human descendant of Satan? I doubt that very much. The demon growled so loud that the ground shook beneath our feet and our hair was blown back by its rancid breath. "You sound like you've got a cold. Would you like a lozenge?" "I am in pain. Can you not tell the difference?" "No, not really. Why are you in pain?" The troll smacked its Buick-sized club into the ground, sending up a huge red cloud of dust. "By what dark treachery do you command me, little human? There is no satanic blood in you. I can smell it."
"You can smell my blood?"
asked Sarah.
"That's gross."
"Of course I can smell your blood. And the other human should take it easy on the donuts, by the way. His cholesterol is absurd." "I'm on a diet," I said. And it was true, too. Ever since Miss Hatchetface had come to live with us, she insisted on cooking every meal with sulfur. The troll rubbed its stomach and grumbled. "Well, go ahead and get on with it. What do you want to know?"
"Everything," said Sarah.
"I don't know everything, and to tell you what I do know would take longer than one of your pathetically short human lifetimes."
"Then just tell us the interesting stuff," said Sarah.
"Fine. Satan's office was here. Now it's not. I was asleep and didn't see what happened."
"That's it? Do you have any idea where Satan went?"
"He has forbidden me from telling. I cannot say even to you." There was another earth-shaking roar, and the demon fell to its knees. "He went to the gate of Orakta," it bellowed with a strangled cry of pain. The troll dropped its club to the ground, sending up a cloud of red dust that all but blinded us. The demon was only a colossal dark shadow in the dusty fog as it seized its head with both hands and roared. Without warning, it picked up the club and swung it, catching Frankenteddy in the stomach and sending him rolling backwards head over heel. The troll demon roared again, raising the club above its head to strike.
"Stop!"
yelled Sarah, but the troll demon paid her no mind. It smashed its club down to the ground next to her, missing her by mere inches. The ground splintered and chunks of rock went flying. The troll demon aimed the next blow at Miss Hatchetface. She stuck her hands out in front and caught the club as it slammed into her chest. The blow sent her skidding back 20 feet, but she didn't let go of the club. Instead, she wrapped her arms and legs around it in a bear hug. The demon raised the club up and waved it in the air, trying to shake her off like an unwanted insect. She did indeed fall off, landing on the demon's head. The club came sailing through the air again, and I rolled out of the way just as it came crashing down beside me. I looked up to see Miss Hatchetface with her arms wrapped around the troll's fat and ugly head, one seizing on a horn and the other stuck inside a giant nostril. The troll grabbed hold of her and pulled her off, squeezing her in its enormous scaly fingers. I was pushing myself to my feet to run and help when something smashed into me from behind and knocked me back into the dirt. I looked up to see Frank and Teddy sprinting full tilt at the demon. He buried a fist into the demon's bulbous gut, and it dropped Miss Hatchetface back into the sand. She didn't move once she hit the ground. The demon raised his club to strike again, but there was a bright flash of silver light, and its head ballooned to 10 times its size, sending the troll toppling to the ground unconscious. I looked over to my left and saw Sarah holding out the remote of minor inconveniences like a sword. Frank and Teddy stood panting with his hands on his knees, and Miss Hatchetface still lay unmoving on the ground. I ran over and knelt beside her. Her eyes were closed, and I bent down to see if she was still breathing. Achoo! Her forehead smashed into mine as she lurched forward to sneeze. Little purple stars swiveled and danced across my vision. Sorry, I'm allergic to hell dust. It's fine, I replied, rubbing my aching forehead. You've got a really hard skull. She put on a sheepish grin. Thanks. Frank and Teddy walked up and held out what looked like a polka-dotted scrap of tablecloth. A handkerchief for the Lady Hatchetface. Oh, thank you, Frank and Teddy, she said, as she accepted the handkerchief. But where did you get this? From my pocket. You have pockets? Of course. But you don't wear clothes. And? Nothing. I don't need a handkerchief right now. Thanks, Frank and Teddy. Miss Hatchetface looked a bit green as she handed the handkerchief back to him. Are you, going to put it back in your pocket? She asked. Later. Okay. Sarah came over and sat down in the dirt next to Miss Hatchetface. She didn't say anything, but it was obvious she was upset. What the hell just happened? I asked. I don't know, but it's not good. The troll shouldn't have been able to attack someone with the blood of Satan. The moment it swung the club, it should have burst into flames. And... What? Sarah asked. How did you make the demon obey you? What do you mean? You shouldn't have been able to counteract Satan's orders, unless you somehow have more satanic blood than Satan himself, which is impossible. Sarah frowned. Regardless, Miss Hatchetface said, this is no longer the place for a human little girl and her father to be wandering around. And Frank and Teddy, I want you to take them back. Sarah opened her mouth as if she was about to argue, but she seemed to think better of it and closed it again, slumping her shoulders. I also believe it to be prudent, Frank and Teddy replied. He raised his arms and the purple and black flames licked up around us, but this time, there was no sensation of being sucked up through a straw. This time, we stayed exactly where we were. What the? Miss Hatchetface said, stunned. I do not understand. Miss Hatchetface turned her face skyward. Oh, my God, he sealed it up. It cannot be. What happened? Miss Hatchetface looked at me. She had gone so pale she could have passed for human. Satan's sealed the exits of hell. There's no way for us to get back to Earth now, not unless we can find him and get him to unseal the portal. Oh, I said. My stomach gave a nasty, squirming sensation. Then I guess we have no choice but to head to this Oraktar place. Do you know the way? At the mention of Oraktar, Miss Hatchetface went even paler.
Demons aren't allowed at Oraktar. Evil things live there.
More evil than demons?
Much more.
Chapter 16. Labyrinth Demons and Old Ladies. We trekked across the flat expanse of blood-red desert waste. The sand was loose beneath our feet, and giant yellow bones jutted through the ground like broken teeth. As we drew nearer to the gate of Oraktar, the bruised purple clouds had grown fewer, and Hell's red sun had grown larger and brighter in the sky, and periodically sending off arcs of orange fire around its edges. The air was now thick with acrid black smoke, forcing us to keep a slow pace as it was increasingly difficult to breathe.
"Where is this gate of Oraktar?"
I asked.
"It's not far from here,"
Miss Hatchetface replied.
"The quickest way is through the maze of unspeakable horror. After that, we just have to cross the river Styx and we'll be there."
My stomach dropped half a foot. Is there a way around the maze of unspeakable horror? It doesn't really sound like a very kid-friendly place.
"There is, but it's 500 miles out of the way."
"Oh."
"Don't worry,"
Miss Hatchetface said, giving me a reassuring pat on the shoulder.
"I've navigated the maze plenty of times before. Satan has it included in the annual company fund run for charity."
"Satan gives to charity?"
Well, not really. Most of the money goes towards advertising all the good the charity does."
"Oh, okay." We trudged on for what must have been an hour before the high brown walls of the maze came into view. They were made of rough-hewn brown stone and covered with climbing green ivy. Above the maze, a black storm cloud hovered, jolting and flashing with electricity and emitting a slow, steady rumble of thunder that bore an unsettling similarity to the growl of a very large animal. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I looked at the maze. I turned to Miss Hatchetface. "You want me to go in there?" I said, hoping she'd catch the reluctance in my tone.
"Don't worry, it looks a lot worse than it is. Besides, it's probably abandoned just like everywhere else."
I shook my head. "First off, I'm a dad. It's my job to worry. Second, I really don't think probably is good enough."
"We've been through this already. Sarah is the descendant of Satan. Nothing down here can harm her."
"Except for giant homicidal trolls, you mean?"
"Well..." "Oh, come on, Daddy,"
Sarah interrupted.
"Don't be such a baby."
Without waiting for my response, Sarah charged ahead into the maze's entrance. I yelled for her to wait, but she was already out of my sight. I sprinted after her, and I could hear Frank and Teddy and Miss Hatchetface behind me. We caught up with Sarah before we made it too far into the maze, which was different than the surrounding hellscape. The blood-red sand of Hell's deserts had been replaced by a loamy, dark brown soil, and the blistering heat of the crimson sky had been replaced by a moist coolness and a roof of dark thunderclouds. The entire maze was eerily silent but for the rumbling clouds overhead, and our footfalls and voices were muted, as if the walls didn't reflect sound but instead absorbed it. We tread slowly and carefully as Miss Hatchetface recited the directions to herself under her breath. As we made our way deeper, toward the heart of the maze, I noticed a familiar, uneasy feeling begin to grow in the back of my mind. At first, I tried to shake it off as some simple paranoia, but the deeper we went, the harder it became to deny, and now I was sure of it. We were being watched. I turned my head left and right at every shadow that played across the wall, every minuscule sound that I imagined underneath the ever-present growl of thunder. But my eyes couldn't catch anything out of the ordinary. When they finally did, it wasn't the presence of something that shouldn't be there that I noticed, but the absence of something that should have been there. And suddenly and without warning, Miss Hatchetface was gone. My heart instantly leapt into my throat and stayed there, throbbing uneasily and choking the words that I had intended to sound brave. Miss Hatchetface, I called out, but there was no reply. I looked to Frank and Teddy. Did you see where she went? I asked. Frank and Teddy simply shook his head, a deep expression of unease stealing across his normally carefree face. I turned back around and started calling for her again, my voice as small I could see oppressive silence of the high stone walls and the low rumble of thunder above us. It's no use, Frank and Teddy. Do you know what could have happened to her? But Frank and Teddy didn't answer, and when I turned around, he was gone as well. I seized Sarah tightly by the hand and knelt down in the moist soil, lifting her chin up gently to meet my gaze. Her eyes were wide with fright. Did you see what happened to Frank and Teddy? I asked. She silently shook her head. Don't worry, I'm not gonna let anything happen to you. I stood up and began scanning the walls and the maze for any sign of Miss Hatchetface and Frank and Teddy. My hand was slick with sweat as I held Sarah's hand in an iron grip. But my caution was for nothing. Suddenly, the warmth of Sarah's hand was gone and my own was closed in on itself. Sarah! I shouted, though I knew there would be no answer. My knees sank into the dirt as my legs buckled beneath me. The world faded into nothing, and I found myself tumbling through a rushing darkness before landing on a cold, stone surface. I could see nothing around me except for two glowing red eyes that stared down from high above. Well, a deep voice bubbled from the shadows. What have we here? I haven't tasted a human soul in so very long. You four will make a fine meal indeed. Just as my heart was about to explode out of my chest, I heard Miss Hatchetface shout from beside me. Ah, damn it, Reggie! What do you think you're doing? Miss Hatchetface? The deep voice cracked. A blinding light filled the room around us. As my eyes adjusted to the brightness, I saw that we were in a damp cave with a colossal-like lizard beast whose scaly torso emerged out of a rippling black portal in the wall. The lizard beast scratched the back of his neck and put on a sheepish grin. Well, what are you doing here? He stammered. What am I doing here? What are you doing here? Well, I do work here. Miss Hatchetface rolled her eyes and sighed in exasperation. Yes, I know that, but why are you still here? Every demon for miles has abandoned hell for Disneyland up on Earth. This time it was Reggie's turn to sigh. I know that, but I'm stuck in the wall. What? How is that even possible? You're a Labyrinth demon. You can leave the wall anytime you want. You came to the office Christmas party at Benihana's last year? Reggie looked at the ground, his eyes shifting uneasily. Yeah, well, I've gained a little weight since then, and, you know. I don't get it, Sarah said. I believe that Reggie is too fat for the portal, said Frank and Teddy. Yeah. That's it. Reggie coughed. Well, why didn't he just say that? Sarah asked. I believe he is embarrassed of his immense and sudden weight gain because it makes him feel unattractive, Frank and Teddy droned on. But he need not feel embarrassed. Gee, thanks, Frank and Teddy. No need to thank me. You need not feel embarrassed, because you were equally unattractive before the weight gain. Oh, said Reggie. So, said Miss Hatchetface, is there anyone else here we should know about?
Reggie scratched at the space between his snake-like nostrils. His eyes shifted uncomfortably to the side.
Well, Miss Thompson is here.
Oh, no, not that miserable old crone. What's so bad about Miss Thompson? I asked. Miss Hatchetface blew out the heaviest sigh yet. Oh, she's the meanest, most miserable wretch in hell. She guards the center of the maze, but in reality, she's not even supposed to be here. When Hellcore bought up all the local real estate to build the maze, she was the only one who refused to move. They even bulldozed her house, but she just set her teacups up in the middle of the rubble and went about her business. Then they bulldozed her, but she popped right back up out of the ground like a weed.
And one time, she once called me a brainless, oversized toy, said Frankenteddy. But you are a brainless, oversized toy, said Reggie. Yes, and you, Reggie, are enormously fat.
Reggie slouched in his portal. And don't worry, Mr. Monster Man. I don't think you're that fat. Reggie perked up a bit. You are pretty ugly, though. Reggie sank back down like a deflated balloon, his self-esteem no doubt damaged beyond repair. Maybe we can focus on the problem at hand, said Miss Hatchetface. Reggie, do you think you could take us through the maze wall and go around Miss Thompson?
Reggie scoffed. First you call me fat and ugly, and now you want me to do you a favor.
Yes, please,
said Sarah.
Reggie smiled down at her.
Well, you are awfully cute. I could take you through the wall, I guess. But since none of you are wall beasts, there's a slight chance that the endless void between dimensions would turn your brains to applesauce.
How much is slight?
Asked Miss Hatchetface. Somewhere between 50 and 100%.
How is that a slight chance?
Reggie shrugged. I mean, it's more or less slight, isn't it?
No, it's more. It's definitely more.
Sorry. The only way through the maze is to answer to old Miss Thompson's riddles.
That's no problem, Sarah said. I'm great at riddles. I know you are, honey, but Miss Thompson isn't. She's too old and senile to remember the answers to her own riddles. She can barely remember the riddles themselves.
Rolling her eyes, she turned to Reggie.
Can you please just drop us off where you found us? We've already wasted enough time here.
Sure, said Reggie. He paused, scratching nervously at the back of his neck with one of his long silver talons. There is one more thing, though. Could you, not mention to Miss Thompson that I'm still here? She doesn't know yet, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Sure, just hurry up and put us back, said Miss Hatchetface.
With that, we were yanked back into the swirling blackness of the wall and spat out on the other side. We tumbled hard through the dirt and mud, half of us winding up on our heads. I guess Reggie didn't really like all the fat comments, I said, struggling to my feet. Then perhaps he should have considered not becoming so fat, suggested Frankenteddy. I surmised from his tone that Frankenteddy was still upset by Reggie's comment about his lack of a brain. We dusted ourselves off as best we could and resumed our trek through the ominous high walls of the maze. As we continued on, a thick, milky white mist began to gather. We walked on without stopping for about 15 minutes before we came to a large, open section scattered with tree stumps with teacups on them. At the very center of the clearing sat a particularly ugly tree stump overgrown with hideous gray moss. And to my surprise, the tree stump opened its mouth and spoke,
and I realized it was actually a very ugly, squat old woman. And what I had mistaken for moss was really a dirty rat's nest of hair. Her face was like rotted tree bark spotted with lichen, and hunching over her knobbly wooden cane, she couldn't have stood more than 3 feet tall. I surmised from the collection of mismatched teacups and the foul look of contempt on her face that this must be Miss Thompson.
"Look at you 4 hooligans," she snapped, "stomping around my living room uninvited, and in muddy shoes to boot."
Miss Hatchetface stuck her hands on her hips and cocked her head.
"Look around you, old bat. Your whole floor is made of mud."
"Yeah," snapped the old lady, waving her cane at us with a shaky hand.
"But this is my mud. Who knows where your mud has been?"
"Just tell us the riddle already so we can pass," replied Miss Hatchetface.
No need to sit and visit with an old lady over tea after barging into her house uninvited. You just get straight to the point, don't you? All right, well, let me think."
Miss Thompson squinted her eyes and rubbed her chin.
What's white and black and, how does that one go? Oh, right. There are 2 paths in the woods, and one is white and the other is black. No, that's not right. Oh, I've got it. What's the square root of 472? That's not a riddle, Sarah said. It's a riddle if I say it is. So, what's your answer?
Miss Thompson snapped. "Does anybody have a calculator?" I asked. Everybody patted themselves and turned out their pockets, but nobody came up with anything.
"Oh, I've got it. It's 5.
We all stared at her in confusion.
"You're not even close. It's 21 7/10.
Sarah tilted her head and put on a quizzical look.
"But that's what I just said," she replied.
Miss Thompson teetered on her cane and scratched her cobwebby mess of hair.
You did?"
she asked. "Oh, yes," Miss Hatchetface cut in, nodding vigorously. She elbowed me in the ribs.
"Isn't that right, Darren?"
she asked. Yeah, that's right." Miss Thompson wrinkled her brow and scratched her head in thought. Deep wrinkles like the grooves in tree bark crossed her face.
"I could have sworn. Well, all right then, dearie. I apologize. I'm afraid my memory's not quite what it used to be. You 4 go on ahead, I guess."
Miss Thompson stuck her cane in the dirt and hunched back over it, retaking the appearance of a very old, knotted and ugly tree stump. "Well, that was anticlimactic," I said. After we passed Miss Thompson's living room, the milky white mist of the maze began to clear, and the smell of damp earth gradually faded away into the sulfuric tang of hell. It was around 30 minutes more before we reached the end. The mouth of the exit opened to a path of gray cobblestones that led down to a sheer canyon face. Both sides of the path were lined with broken sun-bleached skulls. "Is that the way to the river Styx?" I asked. "Yes. I just hope the ferryman hasn't abandoned his post like everyone else." We walked to the edge of the cliff, and I stared down at the valley below. The steel-gray waters cut around canyon walls of red-striped sandstone that must have been carved over incomprehensible ages. A lone ship bobbed at the near bank of the river. "How do we get down?" I asked. "We'll have to make a hike of it," Miss Hatchetface replied. She nudged at the path with her foot, and I saw a clearing in the rocky ridge that lined the edge of the cliff face. I followed it with my eyes along a path of gray cobblestones that snaked its way back and forth down the mountainside until it disappeared in the distance. The path was at points wide and gently sloped, and at other points, it was only a few feet across along a steep decline, with sheer rock cliff on one side and nothing but air on the other. Staring down at it gave me vertigo. "Best not to look down," said Miss Hatchetface. Chapter 17. The River Styx. It took us 4 hours and 2 near-death experiences to hike down the cliff face to the waiting boat. It was the largest ship I'd ever seen by several times over. The hull was a massive construction of dark pitted wood and iron, and the sails were ghostly gray and moth-eaten. The ferryman stood at the riverside, leaning on a long wooden oar. He stood at least 10 feet tall, and he was clothed in a ragged salt-stained cloak that obscured his face. He was still enough he could have been mistaken for a statue, until we drew nearer to the riverbank and he spoke. "Who goes there?" he challenged. His voice was slow and deep, like the motion of the river. I looked to Miss Hatchet-Face for reassurance before I replied. She gave me a weak smile that, for lack of a better alternative, would have to serve as my courage for the moment. "My name is Darren Rogers. This is Frank and Teddy. This is Miss Hatchet-Face, my nanny. And this is my daughter Sarah." The ferryman didn't answer. I looked at Miss Hatchet-Face again for guidance, but she merely raised her eyebrows and shook her head. "Why do you seek to cross the river Styx?" he asked. I cleared my throat. "We seek the gate of Oraktar. We have business there." "Ah, but no demon is permitted at the gate of Oraktar. It is an evil place." "Right, well, we know that. I guess we were just hoping that maybe just this once you could make an exception." The ferryman looked up at the sky, pausing for a long moment. Whether he was considering my words or something else, I couldn't say. Finally, when I was sure he wouldn't reply, he spoke again. "I have not ferried a soul across these waters in a millennium and more. Yet today, my services have been called upon twice. Perhaps you should turn back the way you came. Even you must sense that mortal souls have no business in this realm." "Look, we need to speak with Satan. If we have to, my daughter here will command you to ferry us across and you'll have no choice but to obey." The ferryman turned his hooded face to Sarah before looking back at me. "I am not a demon," he said, his voice not strained from its methodical slow measure. "Nor am I beholden to the dark magic that resides within your daughter's blood. I will not deny your right to decide your own destiny. I must warn you, however, you will not like the fate that awaits you on the other side of this river." A chill ran down my spine like a finger of ice tracing its way down my back. "And what is that exactly?" The ferryman looked to the sky again. "Come, it is time to go." Without waiting for a response, the ferryman turned and climbed the boardwalk to the ship. Hesitantly, we followed behind him. The interior of the ferryman's ship looked as if it hadn't seen a living soul in thousands of years. The wood was ancient and reeked of mold, and it would creak and moan whenever the ship crested a wave. The cabin was lit by candles that had all but nearly burnt down to nothing, their guttering light only sufficient enough to see a few yards in front. The atmosphere was oppressive, and silence hung as heavy on us as the dark, salt-soaked air. The ferryman sat at the front of the cabin and stared at us in stony silence, his long oar resting on his lap. The rest of us sat across from him, except for Frank and Teddy, who had abandoned us for the upper decks of the ship so that he could violently retch over the side. Hoping to break the heavy silence, I decided to speak to the ferryman. "So, I guess the oar is mostly decorative then, if you don't steer the ship, I mean." The ferryman persisted in a silence. Just when I was sure he wouldn't reply, he spoke.
A long time ago, I steered the ship. But the ship has made the same journey for eons. She knows her own way now.
Oh, so the ship is alive then? Can she hear what we're saying?
Perhaps you should ask her.
A feeling in my gut told me that would be a bad idea, and so I let the silence settle on the room once again. But it was only on us for a few moments before Sarah spoke up.
Mr. Ferryman,
she said in a small voice.
My name is Charon.
Oh, Mr. Charon then?
Yes, child.
You said the ship was alive, right?
Indeed. She has seen even more years than I, though not always as a ship.
What was she before?
I do not know. I had not yet come into being.
Well, if she has to make the same trip every time forever and ever and ever, doesn't she ever get bored? Or tired?
Perhaps she does. I have never asked. But there is no other way across the river.
Sarah stood up and rubbed the wall of the ship affectionately as if she were petting a large dog.
But I don't get it. Why not build a bridge?
Charon leaned forward in his seat. His face was still shrouded by the hood, but his eyes shone, two silvery black glimmers in the candlelight.
Because the creature of the river would not allow it.
Sarah's eyes widened just a little.
Creature? What creature?
The ferryman placed two large gray hands on his knees, pushing himself to his feet and leaning on his oar.
It is a creature from another world. A world of eternal cold and darkness, beholden to laws much crueler than our own.
And it doesn't like bridges?
Asked Sarah. The ferryman chuckled, a deep throaty noise that was perhaps more morose than mirthful.
The river is the creature's domain. It does not allow anything to stray into its domain but this ship. And that only by an ancient agreement made by gods and devils long since dead.
Sarah was enthralled.
What agreement is that?
She whispered.
The agreement that we have broken. That only the dead shall pass its shores.
The ship tilted and we slid over in our seats. Hold on, are you saying we're not welcome on this river?
I am saying that it is up to the creature whether to welcome you or not.
And if the creature doesn't? Charon stared up at the ceiling of the cabin, quiet and statue still, and I got the feeling that he wasn't looking at the ship but through it, up at the red skies above.
If the creature welcomes you, then fate has willed your journey to succeed. If not, well, that is beyond my control.
The ship tilted to the other side, and I fell out of my seat onto the rotting wood of the cabin floor. The wooden planks of the cabin creaked and groaned as the ship gave another violent lurch. Then there was a sound, a terrible rumbling that rattled the floorboards beneath us. What the hell was that?
The creature. It has not welcomed you.
There was another rumble, louder this time, and the wood vibrated and hummed like a harp string. We rolled across the moss-stained floor as the ship rocked violently from side to side. What did we do? I shouted at Charon, but he did not reply. The ship bucked again, and we flew across the cabin. I hit the floor face down and my face stung with pain as my nose began to bleed. I looked up just in time to see Sarah sprinting up the stairs to the deck. I tried to call out to her, but another tilt of the ship sent me rolling into the wall, smashing my shoulder hard against the dark, moldy wood. The only one who kept his balance was Charon. He stood stone still and calm, staring up at the ceiling at only something he could see. I scrambled to my feet and raced up the stairs after Sarah. The scene was chaos. The ship tilted and swayed as the river churned foamy and white beneath us. Frank and Teddy clung to the mast of the ship for dear life, while Sarah leaned over the rails. "Sarah!" I shouted, my voice drowned out by the roar of the waves. She didn't turn around. A giant gray tentacle reached out of the churning waters and coiled around the mast above Frank and Teddy, snapping it off like a giant toothpick. As the ship tilted to the right, I let go of the doorway to the cabin and let myself tumble towards Sarah. I slammed into the railing next to her and pulled myself to a standing position. "What are you doing?" I shouted above the fray. "Magic! Go back inside!" she shouted. A golden ball of light burst from her open hands and shot toward the water, exploding in a shower of dazzling sparks. My legs buckled beneath me as the ship lurched upwards, suddenly free of the water and sailing through the open air. I rolled around the deck until I smacked into something wet and hard. I turned around to see that my back was resting against a thick gray tentacle. My eyes followed the writhing mass of sinewy muscle, and I saw that it had coiled itself around the ship and began waving it through the air like a toy. A bolt of green light hit the tentacle and it recoiled, dropping the ship back down into the waiting river below. Water splashed over the sides, soaking the deck and drenching me to the bone. "We've got to go faster," I yelled at Sarah. "I'm on it," she yelled back. I watched as she ran to the stern of the boat and held her hands out as if she were pushing against an invisible wall. A huge plume of green flames exploded from her hands and the ship rocketed forward, sending me rolling to the stern and Frank and Teddy flying off the mast to join me. I pulled myself up to look over the railing. Beyond the shimmering heat of the green flames, tentacles were thrashing around in a rage. Any one of them looked as if it could smash the ship away to bits, but slowly they were getting further and further away. Before I knew what was happening, the ship smashed into the shore with a terrible crunch and I was thrown to the deck again. The deck rumbled, and the wood groaned in protest as we rode across the stony red dirt. The ship slowed to a halt, and I pushed myself to my feet to see that the river was well beyond us. I watched as the angry gray tentacles continued to thrash, but they didn't reach past the boundary of the shore. For now, at least. It seemed like we were safe. Disoriented and soaked, we all shambled off of the boat. Charon climbed down the boardwalk and leaned on his oar as he stared at the broken mast and shattered hull of the ship. "I'm sorry about your boat," said Sarah.
It is of no consequence. The ship will heal itself."
We watched in awe as new wood sprouted from the mast like a tree, splitting off into branches and leaves that became the sails. The shattered wooden planks of the hull knitted together like stitched wounds. "That's amazing," said Sarah.
"Yes, it is,"
replied the ferryman, rubbing the hull of the ship affectionately. He turned around to look at us, and though he didn't lower his hood, I thought I could detect a note of sadness in his voice when he said,
"I wish you luck on the rest of your journey."
He didn't wait for our reply, but instead turned toward the ship. He stuck the oar in the ground beneath it and pushed it like a lever, dislodging it from the riverbank. The ship slid back down the shore and into the river, where it bobbed up and down in the steel-gray waters. The massive gray tentacles slipped beneath the waves, and the waters closed above them, still and peaceful. The ferryman climbed aboard the waiting ship and it began to sail away, floating off downriver, growing smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared. Sarah looked up at me.
What do you think the ferryman meant by dark magic in my blood?
She asked. I don't know. I'm not sure I want to. Chapter 18. The Gate of Oraktar. The gate loomed as an enormous dark edifice in the distance. The monumental slate-gray stone pillars dominated the landscape, disappearing into the haze of swirling dust that had replaced the clouds. Between the pillars stood a colossal oaken door bounded with dark iron. Why does the gate need to be so big? I asked. My voice was small against the enormity of the structure before me. As if in answer, the ground shook, and fissures snaked and forked their way with the pillars, the tops of which were swallowed by the haze of dust in the sky. I wondered if the gate was going to fall. I hoped we weren't under it if it did. As we drew closer, I spotted Satan standing in front of the giant doors. He was holding something up to the side of his face and having an animated conversation with it. When we were close enough to see him clearly, I realized that it was a cell phone.
I'm sure we can work something out,
he said, tugging at his collar.
There's no need to... Yeah, I understand that, but... Satan!
Miss Hatchetface yelled. Satan spun around on his heel and goggled at us.
What the hell are you guys doing here?
He asked, his voice full of dumb shock.
You shouldn't say what the hell in front of Sarah,
Miss Hatchetface chastised.
It's okay,
Sarah said.
I'm used to it.
Okay. But seriously, you guys, you shouldn't be here right now.
We don't want to be here,
Miss Hatchetface said.
But you sealed the portal back to Earth.
Satan looked at the crumbling gate behind him nervously before replying.
All right, I'll unseal it, but you have to promise not to.
The ground shook violently enough to send us all staggering as we tried to keep our balance, and the cracks in the pillars deepened and forked like errant lightning bolts. Pieces of stone crashed down from the sky like deadly rain.
No,
Satan said into the cell phone.
I'm not ignoring you. Some friends of mine just showed up, and I was... Yes, I understand that. Listen, now's not really a good time for the apocalypse. Do you think that maybe we could...
What?
Earth. But I don't see how that's... But that's...
How is that possible?
No, I'm not questioning your judgment, but...
Okay, I'll let them know.
Satan tried to press the hang-up button, but dropped the phone in the sand by mistake.
Damn it.
I hate these stupid touchscreens. They're completely impossible to use if you have claws. Satan, what the hell is going on?
Miss Hatchetface demanded. Satan's brow furrowed and he scratched nervously at the back of his neck.
Well, the Elder God seems to have... awoken. And you know how the big boss is. Always apocalypse this and mass genocide that.
The Elder God? Gasped Miss Hatchetface. She bit her lip and her face went ghost white.
How did that happen?
Well, you know Jerry.
Jerry who?
Jerry, the intern.
Satan, there are like 8 interns named Jerry.
The one with the axe in his head.
Okay, what about him?
Well, he was supposed to perform the rite of everlasting slumber a couple of weeks ago, but the goat he slaughtered was actually just a llama. And turns out Jerry isn't so smart. Maybe it's the axe in his head.
So the Elder God woke up? Aren't there safeguards against that sort of thing?
Well, you know Gary, the intern?
Miss Hatchetface sighed. I don't want to know. So the Elder God is up and planning to demolish hell, is that it?
Well...
Satan tugged at his collar.
Well, what?
Yeah, and also Earth. But it's okay. I've got a plan.
Oh, no, groaned Miss Hatchetface.
It's easy. All you've got to do is...
Satan's voice was drowned out as the great oaken door of Oraktar cracked and bulged in the center, sending giant splinters of wood flying off like missiles. We turned and ran backwards as the wood groaned, and the colossal doors burst off of the hinges with a sound like angry thunder, crashing to the ground and sending up a red cloud of choking dust. An icy wind blew from the gate, and when the dust cleared, we beheld the Elder God. The creature was a nightmare, an oily black monstrosity that distorted the reality around it, its indeterminate form shifting and moving like a shadow. It was colossal beyond imagining, and so black that it seemed to swallow the very light around it. I had to do a double take as the next beam came striding out of the netherworld gate. It was a human woman dressed in a black, form-fitting blazer and long pencil skirt. I looked around for Satan to explain, but I couldn't see him amongst the rubble. I wondered if he had been crushed by a falling rock. The woman checked her clipboard and pushed her wire-rimmed glasses up her nose with a pencil.
Is there a Miss Sarah Rogers present?
Yes, Sarah said. The secretary glanced up over her glasses.
Well, hello, Miss Rogers. I am the executive assistant of Mr. Urznock, the World Eater.
Sarah wrinkled up her nose.
Okay.
First off, Mr. Urznock wanted to extend his sincerest apologies that you were nearly crushed to death by a troll demon earlier today. Mr. Urznock simply wanted to invade the mind of the demon to communicate with you. However, as I am sure you are all very well aware, a homicidal fury is an unfortunate side effect of netherworld mind control.
Sarah goggled at the woman.
I was almost crushed to death because of a side effect?
We maintain that the convenience of netherworld mind control outweighs the side effect profile.
Okay, why did he want to talk with me?
The secretary checked her clipboard again.
It seems Mr. Urznock had the Earth scheduled for demolition this Wednesday, she said.
Today is Wednesday.
So it is. Unfortunately, we were not able to demolish the Earth on schedule, as a netherworld refugee is still at large within that realm. As such, the Earth cannot be destroyed at this time.
Sarah frowned and scratched her head.
But what does this have to do with me?
The secretary checked her clipboard before replying.
We have the refugee listed as a Mrs. Annie Rogers.
Sarah's eyes went wide.
Mom?
Chapter 19. A Royal Kidnapping. Are you telling me that my ex-wife is from the netherworld? How is that even possible? I asked. The secretary frowned and looked down at her clipboard. She thumbed through a couple of pages before looking back up at me.
We had a foreign exchange program set up at the University of Arizona in 1987.
I met my wife at the University of Arizona in 1987.
Well, there you go.
Oh, wait a second. Isn't that the year all those students went missing for 2 months and came back possessed by demons? Then it was covered up by the administration?
I don't know anything about that.
Really seems like you would. The secretary cleared her throat.
The netherworld is not legally responsible for any unfortunate demon-possessed events, she said.
Her voice flat and uninterested as if she were reciting a memorized speech.
Those students signed waivers.
They waived their rights to not be possessed by demons?
Nobody ever reads the waivers, she said,
shrugging her shoulders.
In any case, given that you are her ex-husband, Urznock has decided to task you with locating her and returning her to the netherworld, so that the Earth can be destroyed. In the meantime, as a descendant of another world being, your daughter will stay here.
What? I shouted.
Don't worry, Mr. Rogers. We have an excellent daycare center. This is unacceptable. I will not abandon my charge to the dangers of the netherworld, Frankenteddy roared.
I can assure you that it is perfectly safe,
the secretary said. She crouched down and put on a big plastic grin as she looked at Sarah.
Here, girl,
she said in a high-pitched voice. Sarah put her hands on her hips and stuck out her bottom lip in a pout.
I'm not a dog,
she said.
Fine,
the secretary replied, standing back up and making a note on her clipboard. She snapped her fingers, and an orb of shining black light materialized from nowhere, growing to envelop Sarah.
Hey, stop that!
Frankenteddy ran at the orb, but before he could reach it, the light had collapsed into nothing and Sarah had vanished. The secretary of Ursnok took advantage of our stunned silence to slink back through what remained of the gate. The shattered stone stubs of the pillars crumbled into dust as we stared at them. What the hell do we do now? I said. The others shrugged. Chapter 20. Satanic Artifacts. I walked over to where Sarah had been standing and stared at the ground in stunned disbelief. My stomach had turned to churning water, and my head was filled with a dizzy, buzzing sensation that overrode all thought. As I looked down at the empty patch of ground, I noticed a small piece of black plastic poking out of the sand. I bent down and pulled out the TV remote of Minor Inconveniences. I slid it into my back pocket, remembering all the hilarious tortures that Sarah had inflicted on Frankenteddy with it. My heart ached as I wondered if I'd ever see her again. Then, when a golden gleam caught my eye, my melancholy mood vanished in an instant.
I've got it!
I exclaimed.
What's that?
Replied Miss Hatchetface. I lifted my left hand and showed everyone my BFF ring around my finger.
This! Sarah gave it to me back on Earth.
She said all I have to do is rub the ring, and it will instantly transport me to wherever she is. Miss Hatchetface knitted her brow and turned down the corners of her mouth.
Are you sure that's a good idea? Even if you do manage to get there, what are you going to do next? How are you going to rescue Sarah from Ursnok? He's an elder god, and you're, well...
I believe the word you're looking for, Lady Hatchetface, is wimp,
Frankenteddy put in helpfully. Thank you, Frankenteddy, I said.
You are welcome, Lord Rogers.
I stared down at the thick golden ring on my finger. A part of me knew that they were right, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to at least try. I rubbed the signet of the ring, and I was lifted up into the air. I hung there for a moment, totally motionless, before slamming into the ground. I spat out a mouthful of hell dust before the ring lifted me up again.
What the
I said, slamming into the dirt again.
Take it off!
Yelled Miss Hatchetface. I slammed into the ground 3 more times before I finally managed to slip the ring off my finger and toss it away. The ring rose up 1 more time before shooting through the ground like a bullet.
Yeah. We never got past beta testing on that, said Satan's voice.
We looked around, but he was nowhere to be seen.
Satan, where are you?
I'm under here, said Satan's disembodied voice.
Under? What do you mean?
Oh. A pointed red tail was waving at us from beneath a giant boulder.
Yeah, I got crushed just a bit.
Are you gonna die? I asked.
Well, that depends. Can evil ever truly die?
Maybe? I chanced.
No. The answer is no.
Well, that's a bummer.
It's a bummer that I'm not gonna die?
It's a bummer that evil can never die.
Well, while this is a wonderfully philosophic conversation, I'd love to continue it after someone gets this giant rock off of me.
I've got it, said Miss Hatchetface. She stepped forward and pressed her hands against the rough gray stone of the boulder. With a heave and a grunt, she rolled the rock off of Satan. "Thanks," Satan said, standing up and making a poor attempt of unruffling his suit and brushing the dust off of himself. "So, now that everything is settled, should we go back to Disneyland?" "What? Everything is not settled. Sarah's been kidnapped and taken to the netherworld." "Well, yeah, but you heard what Urznok's secretary said. As long as a netherworld refugee remains on Earth, it won't be destroyed. No Sarah, no apocalypse. Sorry about your daughter, but, you know, win some, lose some." "Win some, lose some?" said Miss Hatchetface. Her face had gone so red I thought that steam might start shooting out of her ears. She marched up to Satan and jabbed a finger at his chest. "That little girl trusted you, and I am not going to just let you abandon her in the netherworld so that you can sweep your own screw-up under the rug. What would your mother say?" "My mother?" Satan tugged at his goatee. "I really don't see what she has to do with anything." "Oh, no? Well, why don't we call her and find out?" "No!" Satan yelled so suddenly that it made me jump. I hardly think that's necessary. We can just go find Sarah's mom and ask her if she knows how to prevent the apocalypse. That way, it's a happy ending for everyone involved. And, no one's mother needs to get in this. I was only joking anyway about the whole Sarah thing. Trying to lighten the mood, you know." Wow. I really didn't expect the CEO of Hell to be afraid of his mother. "I'm not afraid of her. I have detected insincerity in your voice. It appears you are trying to tell a lie. I shall assist you so that your deception is not detected, Lord Satan." Frank and Teddy turned to me. "Satan is not afraid of his mother." "Thanks, Frank and Teddy," said Satan. Frank and Teddy gave him a salute. "So, why are you afraid of your mother?" I asked. Gee, look at the time," Satan said, checking his bare wrist. "We'd better get up to Earth and start looking for the netherworld refugee." "You're not even wearing a watch." "How on earth are we going to find my ex-wife?" "Don't worry, I know a guy. But before we can do that, we need to grab a couple of things from my office first." "How the hell are we going to get to your office? It's on the other side of Hell." "Don't worry, I've got this." Satan began rummaging in the pockets of his sports jacket and pulled out a wad of empty hamburger wrappers. No, not there. Hold on a second." He began fishing around in the pockets of the other side. There you are." He pulled out a handful of what looked like winged toy horses. "What good are a bunch of toy horses going to do us?" I asked. "Oh, just shut up and pay attention. They expand in the heat." Satan held his palm flat, and blue flames began to swirl and burn around the horses. The little miniatures grew to the size of golf balls at first, leaping out of his palm and onto the ground, running and jumping around in circles as they continued to grow at an alarming rate. And soon, there were 4 full-size Pegasus before us, snorting and stretching their wings, haunches twitching as they anxiously pawed the ground. They were magnificent creatures. Their coats were night black and glimmered with a silver luster in the surrounding flames of hell. Their muscles rippled as they moved, and their flowing, silky black manes brushed against their thickly corded necks as they tossed their heads from side to side. "All right, climb on," said Satan. "Isn't there a saddle or something?" "Oh, don't be a wimp. Just hold on tight to their manes. You'll be fine." I took a deep, steadying breath and pulled myself up on the back of the Pegasus. I twisted its silky mane around my fingers as its muscles quivered beneath me. The hair was softer than a feather, yet it felt stronger than steel. Satan and Miss Hatchetface climbed aboard their mounts as well, and the horses began to snort and paw the ground impatiently. Frankenteddy, however, was leaning away from his Pegasus, leering warily at it as if he was afraid it might suddenly lunge out and eat him.
"Are you all right, Frankenteddy?"
"I have never flown before," he said, his normally monotonous voice betraying a fearful tremor.
"There's nothing to it. Look, even daring can do it." "What's that supposed to mean?"
Miss Hatchetface shot me a quick, apologetic look, then turned her attention back to Frankenteddy.
"What if it drops me? I could die."
"You're made of stuffing. You just bounced right off of the ground."
Frankenteddy shook his head and backed away from the beast.
"I am a bear. Bears are meant to stay on the ground."
"I thought you were a demon."
"This is not the time for technicalities, Darren."
"Look, we really don't have time for all of this. Miss Hatchetface, why don't you just take Frankenteddy with you?"
"What? But I don't even—"
"That is an acceptable compromise."
Miss Hatchetface sighed and said, "All right, then." She leaned over the side of her Pegasus and offered an outstretched hand to Frankenteddy. He took her hand in his two huge paws, and she pulled him unceremoniously onto her mount's back. He wrapped his arm so tightly around her stomach that she began to cough and sputter for air.
"Frankenteddy, you're crushing me."
"I don't want to fall."
"If you choke me to death, you're definitely gonna fall."
Frankenteddy slackened his grip a minuscule amount. "Enough of this nonsense. Is everybody ready?"
"No,"
we all replied in unison. "That's the spirit." He squeezed his legs around the Pegasus' sides and shouted, "Yah!" Upon hearing his command, the Pegasus began to gallop forward, flapping its wings in powerful strokes that kicked up clouds of dust around it. It kicked its paws off the ground and began to soar upwards. After two less than enthusiastic yahs, Miss Hatchetface and I were racing upwards after Satan. I struggled to hang on as my Pegasus soared higher and higher. The wind rushed through my hair as the ground fell away beneath me, and the mighty wings beat their way into the sky. Once we had nearly reached the clouds, the Pegasus leveled out. I looked down at the landscape below. The giant steel-gray river receded behind us as we sailed over blood-red canyons. Flying the Pegasus was a wonderful feeling. It was steady and strong beneath me as I sailed through the bracing cold air above the clouds in hell. We made quick time on the Pegasus, and sooner than I'd expected we were all alighting at the ruins of Satan's former office. "Satan," said Miss Hatchetface, dismounting from her Pegasus, "what are we doing here? As far as I can see, there's nothing left." "Right, that's the point. As far as you can see, there's nothing left." He paced around the floor of his former office slowly, squinting at the ground. He held his hands out in front of him as he walked, as if he was a blind man trying to avoid a pit. "Aha!" he said, stopping on an empty patch of dirt. He crouched down and traced an elaborate pattern in the sand. The ground began to swell at the spot where he had touched. Then the dirt began to fall away as a large steel safe rose from the ground and locked into place with a thud. Satan carefully brushed the red hell dust off the front and began twisting the dial back and forth. Let's see," he muttered as he fiddled with the knob. 13, 33, 31. No, that's not right. 33, 31, 13. No, not right either. Oh, I know. 66, 66, 66. Damn it! Miss Hatchetface rolled her eyes. "You forgot the combination?" Satan scratched his head. "Not exactly. I just don't remember what it is right now."
Just get out of the way. She shoved Satan to the side and gripped the steel cross-shaped handle of the safe, pulling herself up and placing her feet on either side of the thick iron door. The steel bulged and groaned, and thick cords struck out from her neck as she pulled. Then, with a final shriek of twisting metal, the safe door and Miss Hatchetface both tore off and plunked to the ground. Miss Hatchetface pushed the bent safe door off herself and stood up with a grunt. Satan twisted his goatee in his fingers. Wow, that wasn't secure at all. I should really get my money back. I don't think the warranty covers ripped-off doors, I said, eyeing the torn and twisted piece of metal Miss Hatchetface had left lying in the dirt. What was in that thing, anyway? Satan reached into the safe and slid out a slender black leather briefcase with gold latches. He gently set the briefcase down on the dirt. "This was in it," he said. Then, crouching over the suitcase and grinning, he added, "Are you guys ready for this?" Judging by everything that's happened so far, probably not. Too bad, because it's about to happen anyway. He popped the latches on the briefcase, and we all leaned in to see what was inside. Resting against a plush backing of fine red felt were various odd pieces of hard candy and bubble gum in brightly colored wrappers, a set of ratty old brown and gray mittens, and several pairs of outlandishly styled sunglasses, along with other miscellaneous bits of junk. "Ah, Satan," I said. "Yes, Daniel." "What the hell is all this garbage?" Satan arched his eyebrows in mock offense. "Garbage? Garbage? I'll have you know that these are some of the most powerful artifacts of satanic magic in existence. We've got bubble gum, fire-breathing fireballs, the mittens of Kung Fu legend, and not to mention the sunglasses of soul evisceration." "The sunglasses of what?" "Soul evisceration," Satan said, grinning. Do you think we could do without those? Seems like a little bit of overkill." "Are you sure? They're the coolest looking artifact." "Yeah, I'm sure." All right. He looked over the large selection of sunglasses in the suitcase before picking up a wire-rimmed pair with round, blue reflective lenses. "Ah, I'm pretty sure these are the ones," he said, tossing them aside. He picked up the pair of ratty old mittens and held them out to me. "Hey, Daniel, want to try the mittens of Kung Fu legend?" "Actually, yeah, that sounds pretty useful." Satan tossed me the mittens and I caught them, turning them over in my hands as I examined them. They were old and brown, with ugly gray stripes and frayed loose ends of yarn. I slipped them onto my hands, and for a moment, I was surprised to find that they were actually quite comfortable. That feeling quickly subsided as my muscles tensed and forced me into a fighting stance. Wow, these things really work. I was admiring the gloves when a yarn-covered fist popped me in the chin. "What the... ugh," I said, punching myself in the stomach. My two hands seized the back of my shirt and lifted me in the air, sending me flipping over backwards and dropping me onto my stomach. "Oh, right. I forgot. They're programmed to attack human DNA." "Well, how do you turn them off?" I shouted, as the gloved hands slapped my face back and forth. "Just take them off." "I'm trying, but I don't exactly have the use of my hands right now." The gloves grabbed me by the collar again and yanked me to my feet. "Miss Hatchetface," Satan said distractedly as he eyed the artifacts in the case. Miss Hatchetface grabbed my arms and pinned them behind my back, yanking the gloves off and stomping them into the dirt. I collapsed on the ground in a heap of exhaustion. Satan was still minding his artifacts, taking them out of the case one by one to goggle at them like a kid with his favorite toys. "Sorry about that, Daniel. You could have really gotten hurt back there. Luckily, you're too weak to do any real harm, huh?
Yeah, I guess.
Satan pulled out and uncoiled a black leather belt with a jewel-encrusted golden buckle in the shape of a snake.
Ah, check this out. It's the Belt of Master Seduction. Wanna give it a try?
Not even a little, I replied.
Really? But, oh, wait a second. This is actually the Belt of Castration. Close call there, huh, Derek?
I hate you, Satan.
I love you too, buddy.
I pulled myself into a sitting position and rested my head in my hands. So, now that we've got your artifacts, what are we supposed to do now?
I know a guy who can find your ex-wife. After that, I say we knock her over the head and cart her off to the netherworld to trade for your daughter.
You really think it's a good idea to assault the daughter of the Elder God? Miss Hatchetface said in disapproving tones.
Well, what else are we supposed to do?
I don't know. Maybe talk to her instead?
Well, what am I going to do with all these weapons then?
And don't worry, replied Miss Hatchetface. I'm sure you can find some use for them.
Whatever. Anyway, to find your ex-wife, we need to go see my friend the Hermit.
You call your friend the Hermit?
Of course, that's his name.
His name is the Hermit.
Yeah, it's a pseudonym, like Madonna or Cher.
Or Satan?
Exactly. My real name is actually Arnold.
Really?
No!
Chapter 21. Hermits and Snorks.